Hi, I'm here with Michael Merschat and and Brad Northcut. Did I pronounce Merschat right? Did I pronounce that right?
You got it right the second time, Merschat. So
Merschat.
Mershot, yeah,
Okay.
is how to
Merschat.
think of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we're here with I've Never Met a Woman Architect Before podcast with Michelle Hoddle. I'm Michelle Hoddle, and here I am. And I am going to first introduce Michael. Michael grew up on a farm in the Blue Ridge Mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina. After graduating from the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design, he moved up to Washington, D.C. to pursue his career in architecture. He currently serves as the AIA Potomac Valley Chairperson in the Capital Area Custom Residential Architecture Network. After two decades of city life, Michael returned home and found renewed connection with the land and rural community of his youth. He believes that we have an opportunity to bring thoughtful design principles into every home, effortlessly blending the natural flow of the land with modern architecture. Thank you, Michael.
Hello.
Brad was born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He attended the University of Tennessee School of Architecture in 1996-2001. During that time, he also played in the Pride of the Southland Marching Band and was a member of the UT men's rowing and volleyball club teams. During his sophomore year, he was part of a design-build partnership between the UT School of Architecture and the Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise. This firsthand exposure to construction materials and methods heavily influenced his approach to architecture and design, and he interned with builders during the summers of architecture school and worked as a carpenter and custom fabricator on a historic residential design build project in Chattanooga, following graduation to further his understanding of construction practices in the design realm. He moved to Nashville in 2002 to pursue a more formal career in architecture, with his primary focus on single and multifamily urban infill, as well as local restaurants, bars, and boutique retail. During this time in Nashville, he was involved in a number of young professional organizations and neighborhood community advocacy groups, as well as playing competitive volleyball, both beach and indoors, for 15 years. He also personally renovated and restored two historic homes in Nashville, a 1930s bungalow and 1910 Victorian. In 2017, he returned to Chattanooga and joined a newly formed architecture firm, Tinker Ma. His current focus is on high-end single-family homes, along with hospitality projects, including boutique hotels, locally owned restaurant bars, and golf course amenity buildings such as clubhouses and event spaces. Excuse me. He has been with his wife, Anna, for 6 years since moving back to Chattanooga, and has two stepchildren, Bennett, 8 years old, and Anna Blaine, 12 years old. His current hobbies are fishing at every opportunity, golf, and time with the family, finding memorable adventure activities such as zip lining over gator ponds, scuba diving, indoor skydiving, and zorbing, and more fishing.
Yes, that's right.
Zorbing. Okay. And I guess we'll get into what zorbing is. So welcome, I'm welcoming you both. It's great to see you guys here. I met you both last year, I believe, at the CRAN in Chicago. And I know that you both went to school together, and so that was kind of a great thing. I think I also met Michael through Entre Architect also. Is that true?
One thing at that time we figured out. We were connected through that as well. And I had followed you, I think, on some of the old Archie's ArchiTalks.
The blogs.
Yeah, that was I think it was a Bob Borson thing before.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay, so Michael is gonna speak first. What are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
I think, growing up as, where I grew up, and, there wasn't like a lot of like grand architecture or anything that was really ever pointed out to me. It was sort of like our house was the architecture, and I came to appreciate that and look back on all of its quirks now that we have that was there, and just how I think when I was born, it was probably, we had plywood floors that we sort of, migrated that through from plywood to some carpet, and then finally some hardwood in it over the years. And just, fixing another room, getting another thing completed as we went through. And it's slowly, come along to being, mostly finished, I think, even now. And that was sort of like, architecture, this shelter, this home, this, comfort that was given there. And I think a lot of that is a credit to my parents and what it was. And also just experiencing a lot of the farm structures that we had in Western North Carolina. The little town I grew up in was, a heavy dairy and tobacco growing area. And so the old tobacco barns are some of just the most fascinating things, because you kind of have to be able to almost climb up in it from practically any spot and be able to hang, little leaves in there and stuff like that. And so that was, and it just had really interesting light going through there, but also at the same time, it was open, so it dried, but at the same time, it stayed quite dry inside. So there was just that necessity of keeping things, of making an air feel, an open space, but at the same time, also keeping it really dry. But I think, really where I first noticed architecture was on my 8th grade trip to DC. We, it was like, you see all the Capitol buildings and all of the stuff in the Smithsonian, and like none of that like jumped out at me. What jumped out at me was, we were driving up Massachusetts Avenue in the bus, and we go past the National Cathedral, and looking up and seeing just the stained glass rose window there was truly like the first moment where I was like, wow, that's architecture. Like that sort of rung true as something I hadn't witnessed or seen before. And it was just a really special memory in my mind. And I think then, years later, making it up to DC, and my apartment actually overlooked Glover Park, which is a little park that goes through DC, and sat up on the hill from there was the National Cathedral. So I thought that was a fitting tie to something that, little did I know in the 8th grade, I'd see this and then, be living across from it. Probably 20 some odd years later or something. So.
Yeah, I went on my daughter's 8th grade field trip. I think we were the first and last year that they allowed parents on the
We didn't have any parents go. That was the one thing I do remember. There were, I think it was just extra teacher chaperones.
There were like one of the other moms and I, we were the only one from our school. It was like the other school that was kind of like the party school. The moms were like partying in the thing. I wasn't, I was like going to sleep. I was like exhausted by that.
Yeah.
Being with everybody else's kids is like, oh my God.
Well, this was when you were in Pittsburgh, right? When you went?
No, because I wasn't in 8th grade. It was my daughter was in 8th grade.
I got you.
Yeah, this is in California. So so the red eye back, and we have different last names, so I had to like sit in between somebody else's kids, and it's like and I mean, I jokingly say like, I got from that trip, I knew exactly which girls were going to be pregnant like in high school or out of there from that, and I was pretty accurate too. So it's like
There's always the suits saying thing if we have to go there.
Well, they were, they're, I mean, right. It's like when they're going to like Victoria's Secret on their lunch break at the thing, and then telling the Smithsonian guide like, oh yeah, I like this bra, and I was like, what? Like, don't listen to the.
Oh God!
Don't listen to these 8th graders. Right. So you know what it ever.
I was an 8th grade boy. I was just oblivious to everything, I think.
Exactly. Oh no, the 8th grade boy. What? Yeah, no, they were just smelly. On the way back, I'm like, I am not sitting next to you two. Forget it. Like, you guys are. My daughter is sitting next to me, and you are out of here. I'm not smelling you for the rest of the trip. Yeah, on the way home. So Brad, what are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
So, I think some of my first memories weren't, I guess, necessarily about like a architecturally significant building. And remember going to San Francisco when I was 10 on a family vacation, and going to Alcatraz. And I still vividly remember like the somber feeling of that place and how stark and brutal and that was. And a lot of it had to do with um the the tape recorded tour guide thing with the headphones and the somber music in the background, and talking all about how the world's worst criminals were there. So it was just it was just such a strong feeling of place, combined with concrete walls and steel bars, and they lock you up in a cell, just to see what it feels like. And I was like, oh shit. you know so that stuck with me for a long time. And then my sophomore year in high school, we went to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland on an international music festival. I played trombone in the concert band, and I remember being in this little town called Montreux, Switzerland, nestled on Lake Geneva, with the Swiss Alps in the background, and how picturesque. I mean, it just felt like I was in a postcard. So growing up in Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is a beautiful city. In the 80s, it wasn't, because it wasn't like an architectural bastion. So, in being younger, as Michael kind of alluded to, there were some things that I really took for granted. I didn't really notice architecture. I was just in my own little world. So getting out of town and having some experiences, where I was able to, feel some things differently and kind of get out of my own bubble, I think helped me feel some things a little bit differently. And I would say the most significant one would have been the same international music competition 2 years later. My senior year in high school was in Sydney, Australia. And so we got to perform in the Sydney Opera House. And, so that was like,
Wow.
this is a very well-known building. I'm going to be doing some stuff in it. So again, having that brought into my world and into my bubble sort of forced me to look at things. It's like, okay, that's, this thing's pretty awesome, and they built everything around the harbor and everything around that opera house, it was all about that building, as the icon in the moment. So, it really, that really kind of opened up my eyes to like, okay, there's some pretty cool stuff out there. I just need to be able to, get out in the world and, see it and experience it. And, and in doing that, once, I step back into, life, and whether it's in Chattanooga or Nashville and early on in my career, it helped me to kind of stop and try to take in some things that are in my everyday life, and consider them a little bit differently than just, just walking past something because it's something I did every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you're the only person that I've ever met that actually played in the Sydney Opera House.
Nice.
Like, people are giving it as their favorite building,
Yeah.
but nobody's ever said like I played in the Sydney Opera House.
Well, that's one of those things that when you play like Two Truths and a Lie, that I always threw in there, and nobody's guessing that one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I didn't. Yeah, that's definitely.
How did you, did you know what you were going into for school at that point when you played at Sydney in the Sydney Opera House?
I had an idea. I wasn't sure if it was going to be architecture or graphic design. I knew that I wanted to do something creative, but I just wasn't sure what avenue that would look like. But at that point, I had no art training of any kind. All of my fine arts credits through high school were all through music. And so, I'd never touched a pen to paper or painted anything for fun. Just that had not been on my radar. It was sports and music, and that was about it. But there was something that kind of drew me to the creative side of those things. And I was told since I was good at math that this would be a good thing to do, and sounded kind of cool. I'm not much of a reader, so law was out. And I remember in 7th grade biology class, I almost passed out from dissecting an earthworm. So I'm like, well, medicine's not going to do it. um, so yeah, it kind of narrowed my field into something, I wanted to do something that was kind of fun and cool and notable. And architecture kind of seemed to just steer its way into my lane.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I did well in drafting, but understanding like actually what I was getting into, it probably wasn't truly until like third year that I've kind of grasped what it was and what it meant and like what we were doing. And kind of like a lot of pretty things or stuff you'd see, but like fully grasping that. So I was never one of those kids that said, I mean, I love playing with Legos, but I was never one of those kids that said, when I played with Legos, I knew I wanted to be an architect. Like that was never me. I was definitely well, let's build this, knock it down, and build a dam with some mud outside. And then I enjoyed drafting, and had known that I had architects in my family, and that was essentially it. Like I could, so I think getting to Tennessee was almost like the perfect school for me, because it did allow you to grow and learn from that, that point, and kind of took us into really caring about it and really believing in it. And I think that was one of the special things that I took out of what we got from school, because I feel like I came into it with like, yeah, sure, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make buildings, and it was just an interesting experience that I'm always interested to hear how people how their experience was. If they're like, no, I always knew, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that was not me.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that.
I was like, I love
thing.
it, but it's like I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm supposed to do do well at this, right? That's all I kind of knew, and not knowing what it was, but that was all how I had navigated high school, and so that sort of was my approach coming in. And then I was like, oh, I get what we're doing and the meaning and how we're creating these things. And I probably took me 2 years plus beginning of the third. I was kind of figuring it out and understanding what it meant and how it can change things, how it can change, public perception and everything else. It's that's when it made a difference for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that third year thing, because I was telling someone that recently. I have a friend who recently went back to architecture school as her second career.
Wow.
And giving some pep talks, because like I vividly remember first year being like, oh man, what is happening? It's fairly overwhelming. And there were some kids in my class that had known that this is what they wanted to do for a long time, whether it was something that was kind of a family thing, or there were just some people that had been interested in it, and I was felt kind of completely overwhelmed. So yeah, it took a solid 2 years of just fumbling through it and not understanding why when to draw a straight line it's supposed to be squiggly. Like this makes no sense to me. So yeah, it was third year in Bob French's studio, he was just such a grounded individual and so practical. And but also he really wanted us to push some things creatively, but he was big on the purpose, and just however he presented it, at that point a light bulb kind of came on, and I was like, oh, okay, now I kind of get this, and I think I might actually be able to be good at this.
Yeah.
So that was another little spark that as with anything in life, if you're struggling with it, you're like, this sucks, I want to do something else. But once you get a little bit of momentum and confidence, you're like, all right, let's really lean into it.
Yeah, you know how it is. I mean, right? Like, I mean, you guys have kids, right? So, there's kids that go to school like the first day and they already, it's like they're already writing like a paragraph or whatever. Then there's other kids, but by the time they're in third grade, they're all pretty much the same. It's like everybody has like gotten up to speed or whatever. The fact that one kid knew how to write a paragraph like the first day of kindergarten, doesn't really have any bearing on how he's going to succeed in life. And I think that like really until you get into the third year of architecture school, I mean, of course, unfortunately, they eliminate everybody the first, right? They eliminate 50% the first year, 50% the second year. So it's like the people that are left the third year are typically the people that, okay, it's like I'm I'm doing well enough to get through, but I also enjoy it. Like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Those first 2 years, it was more so like, I'm just going to do this, and willing and enjoying, definitely enjoying parts of it. But some of it, I was just sort of willpower over anything else to decide how I was going to approach it. Yeah. I had the third year professors was Randy Jones and Martella, and I got a lot out of both of those. And those two design studios were really useful for me. And one of them was the lowest design school grade I got in all of it. But I came out of that class with, like, I came and asked him about it. And he goes, you get it. He's like, but that last project, you didn't get it enough. And he goes, I think you actually see what it was now. And basically, I kind of had some project that looked like the Hollywood Bowl or something. And to be frank, like, I had to look up what the Hollywood Bowl was after the reviewer had mentioned it. I was like, I didn't know it. I was like, oh, it was that thing in Bugs Bunny that they hit and it vibrated for everybody. Like, that was
Hollywood Bowl, right? Which Hollywood Bowl? The original Hollywood Bowl or the Frank Gehry Hollywood Bowl? Yeah.
Original, the original one, yeah.
The original one. Okay.
I don't think they would. I think I would have gotten a better grade maybe if I gone that other route.
I don't know. I mean, it's not like you did that much, there anyway. I mean, I I appreciate Gary's work, but I don't think, like, right, that's kind of a big demand for like a club, like, right, a bandstand, right? You're gonna, like, redesign a bandstand. So yeah. So what are your what three classic buildings do you like, and why?
All right. Yeah, this was, I totally appreciate you giving us three. I probably could have just, I'll probably rattle on past that at some point too during this, if you give me too much space. So the three I picked, I kind of I wanted it to be something I had visited. So I felt that was important in this. And something that it was just special in the experience of being there and what stood out to me. And my first one probably could roll into a little bit of my first answer too, but it's the Basilica St. Lawrence, which is in downtown Asheville. And it's just a tiny little brick Spanish revival Catholic church. And it was designed by Rafael Gustavino, who is famous for these herringbone, like, brick domed structures. And it was when I finished up my freshman year, I was going to go work at a summer camp in New York, and I had come home for a couple weeks, and an architect here in town who somehow knew my mom through a teacher friend or something, he's like, go hang out with him. And he just, hung out with him for the day. And he says, go look at these buildings when you're downtown. Just kind of just walk around a little bit. And I had never gone in there. It was next to the Civic Center. I'd been there plenty of times. I barely even could have told you it was a church next to it. But walking into this and experiencing that elliptical vaulted dome was just amazing. Like, my eyes just went straight up. It was an experience that, like, I don't ever remember feeling at that point. Like, just, that's how you create a space, and especially a religious space too, where, and I'm not a very religious person at all, but it was one of those things that as you step into this space, you began to see what they were trying to communicate and how they wanted to communicate that to the people that were going to be using it. It was just so impressive. And even today, as people come to visit Asheville, and I tell, what are the things they got to say? And we have the Biltmore House here. We have, like, Grove Park, all these neat little, I always have this on, like, that's the one downtown to go see, like, to start and walk into, because it is just that special of a space. And so that's sort of like what, I think you want architecture to do when you walk into it. And then the second one that I picked out, and I guess I'm gonna go through my three, and then Brad will do his three.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And was the Rustem Pasha Mosque, which is in Istanbul. And somehow I picked this over Hagia Sophia, which is amazing in and of itself. But I think, again, it had to do with the scale and the intricacy of what happened once, you got inside. And it was, the entrance to it, the way it addressed the streets, it was just a lovely little setting. And it's off the beaten path a touch, just in terms of like what you go see. I think we found it through I just saw like a little tiny image of it in like a Rick Steves book that my wife loves those. And it's just like this little tiny image. I'm like, oh, where is this? I want to go see that, because it was just a little picture, but I was like, that was enough for me to want to see it. And inside of it was just gorgeous. The tiles were just probably in the best shape of any of the ones that aren't sort of like the main tourist attraction type structures. And so that was my second one, and that was probably the toughest one. And then actually taken to the third is probably the hardest, or not to sound cliche. And as an architect, we always sit here and be like, we want to show you something you've never thought of, you've never seen, you've never, and I can't help that I kept coming back to this. And it's honestly, I love going to see Falling Water. It is one of these buildings that we feel, I think, as architects, sometimes this need to be different and set ourselves apart and just feel like, oh, well, yeah, but have you seen, the Pope Leahy house, or these other little ones to kind of point out as something to have seen, or Kentuck Knob, which is right next to Falling Water. But having visited that in the fall, in the spring, during snow, during COVID, it's just special. The way it engages with the land, it's practically been a century since it was completed. And you walk up to this and you're like, when was it? It could have been done, it could have been on the home tour. It's just a masterful work. And for us to, because everybody knows it, I think we're selling it short as for its power and what it gives us as architects, and to communicate how to treat a site and how to engage it. I mean, just the way it sits over the waterfall, the stair that goes down, the way, they use the windows to open up and let the mist from the stream come up and cool things. I mean, just there's all of these little amazing things to it that get overlooked or forgot about because everybody knows it. And I think, not that I'm just trying to, bring it back or something, but I think that's a special building. And I think there is a classic nature to it that will always keep it there in the forefront of our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is, especially those of us that are in, residential architecture. I mean, there's so many things about that, and like I've said on other podcasts, about anytime anybody brings up Falling Water, right? I grew up in Pittsburgh. I never went to Falling Water until I was already an architect. I was already an architect, already a parent, right? And then I went and I was like, oh my gosh, why I had been to Ohio Pile, right? I had been in that area before. I'd never gone to see that. And then one of the and then another time that I went to see Kentuck Knob, and so I mean, of course, between the two, I would, I mean, Falling Water, right? I mean, there's definitely that. But I mean, I admire more of Frank Lloyd Wright's stuff now than I ever did before. I mean, just even as right. And I've interviewed Vern Swaback, who was the first apprentice for the youngest apprentice for Frank Lloyd Wright, right? So he started working at Taliesin, going to school there when he was 17, and Wright was super old. And then the other one, John Sather, I mean, he started there after Frank Lloyd Wright had already passed away. But I mean, just their stories and just kind of the whole thing. I mean, it does bring the connection, and there were a lot of ideas. He did have a lot. I mean, he had a lot of great ideas, and some people have kind of one of my friends recently was saying oh my God, I thought he was a horrible architect, and I was like, really, a horrible architect, I'm I just don't, and then he kind of rattled off, right, oh, Le Corbusier is a better architect. And I said, have you ever been to any of Le Corbusier's stuff? I said, did you ever go to Europe? He said, no. And I said, did you ever so have you ever seen any of Le Corbusier's stuff? And he was like, no. And I said, then how can you sit there and say Le Corbusier's stuff is like, I mean, I've been to Le Corbusier's stuff. I said, I don't think that I would say that it was that he designs better homes or spaces than Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, but anyway, yeah. I mean, I think it's, I think it's a classic building. Yes. So.
Well, and I had the similar experience to having spent numerous summers of my childhood at my grandfather's hunting lodge, which is 5 miles from Falling Water, and never, not even brought up. Like, we didn't go see it for sure, but it was never even mentioned. Like, it wasn't until I was in school that someone said, it's here, it's in this location. And I looked at the map and I'm like, oh, I spent, summers up there all the time and never heard about it. So it's amazing. Yeah. And it's also, I think architecture, is nowadays also has more reason to go see it. I think within the American conscience too, like that we're trying to, there's more people want to get out there and see those things and not just kind of be like, oh, that's a rich guy's house or something like that. And just ignore it for what it is.
Well, I mean, it was kind of bizarre because like my parents had gone to see it. I mean, my dad had worked for an architect of some things and they never, and I had expressed an interest in architecture and, somehow they had never said it like, oh, let's go see that. Right. Like we would go to Ohio Pile. Like my mom and stepdad, we'd go to Ohio Pile. We would do these things. And I don't know, it's for some reason we just never went to go see that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the tickets were too expensive or something. I don't think kids were allowed in it for a long time, right? I don't think that they were allowed. Yeah. I mean, like my daughter wasn't allowed in there. We had to put her in like some little daycare thing that they had there, and so she wasn't. So maybe it was like you had to be like 16 and up or something before you were allowed to go in or something. I don't know. No. So Brad, what are your three classic buildings that you like?
Having not been to Falling Water, as Michael mentioned earlier, I felt like I needed to, have a list of places that I'd actually visited. I am, a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. The book, The Natural House, was a pretty big influence for me. Just, him discussing his concepts. It's the low hanging fruit is, the compression release and, integration into the landscape and the context. So the first one on my list is Ray Cappy's house in LA that I actually visited on we're at an AIA convention in 2008, and I think Michael and I were I don't know if you visited that house on the home tour at the same time. I think we were both at that conference.
I was in San Francisco, so I might have got. I clearly
San Francisco. No, I'm thinking
it was the San Francisco.
Oh, that's right.
That I went to. So
LA. LA was the Dwell home tour in 2007.
2003 or something.
That's what that was.
2003. It was 2012.
Well, so this was in 2007. It was Dwell magazine had a conference that was in LA. So that was part of the home tour. But some of the similar concepts of Falling Water, like one thing that I really liked about the house was it was so seamlessly integrated into this hillside. You couldn't tell where the house started and stopped relative to the surroundings. Like it was just beautiful. Also like that it really broke the notion of the front door for me. Because you walked up this little path and then you were underneath these big floating planes, and you walked over this like laminated 2x bridge, over a creek that ran under the house, and then the front door was just kind of part of the wall. You just didn't celebrate it like a lot of houses that we typically see every day. It wasn't front and center. It was an experience to get there. And it wasn't about the front door at all. It's about the path that you took to get there. And now he used these concrete towers. I think there were 4 of them that he set into the hillside, and those were the anchors. And they were either stair towers or restrooms. And then he basically just floated the floors and the roofs off of these concrete towers so that there was minimal intrusion to the landscape. So it really nestled this thing in And then, the rest of the work was so much wood detailing and cantilevered beams. There's so much concept in it, between hillside and trees, and it was just beautiful. It also felt a little bit like a time machine, because it was designed in the 60s, and in the early 2000s. It still felt very much like a 60s home. I mean, the color scheme, the materials, like it was just perfect. Yeah. So it was very memorable and influential. And I'm actually using that as a precedent for a house that I'm working on right now, and certainly not knocking it off, but there's a lot of things that we're shooting for, to try to get something kind of cool and unique. I'd say the second one, there's a few that are a little tough, but the Hancock Building in Chicago, I'm not a student of skyscrapers. That's not really my world. But I remember learning about that in school, and then after visiting it, appreciating it a little bit more about the exoskeleton structure, and how just how innovative that was at the time, and what express structure means today, over 100 years later, 120 years later, and how there's a lot of very famous, infamous, and really cool buildings where the structure is the point of the design. So whether it's in residential, or some commercial, exposed beams, exposed columns, exposed structure, is something that, especially with some buildings in Chattanooga, there's a lot of older historic, they may not be historic, but older industrial buildings where, we've all been to, an old warehouse that gets converted into some other kind of modern or current use. And really the only way to screw that thing up is to hide the structure. You want the old beams to stand out. You want the old columns, you want the exposed, 120, 150-year-old brick walls. So, to me, that building is sort of iconic as a precedent that led us into an area and a conversation where not hiding the structure was actually a design technique that was very successful and kind of beautiful, both in concept, with being honest with the structure, and giving us an ability to think about architecture as not having to dress everything up, or put some kind of a finish on it, just because it's not something we typically want to look at. And I think the third one would be the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And in a lot of ways, it speaks for itself. I mean, it's beautiful, it's dynamic, being a religious building, and so incredibly innovative. And, the spires that are dripped sand, are, it's something else. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And there's a lot of it I don't understand, which evokes a lot of feeling. I like to think that after 20 plus years that I can detail pretty well. I have no idea how the hell you detail that thing. I also think it's pretty cool that I think it was 1890 or so when it started, but it's still going. It's this perpetual design that is always
a hell of a Gantt chart they must have had.
Yeah, I know.
What was that?
The Gantt chart.
It must have been a hell of a Gantt chart they had there.
Well, it probably started with an abacus.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a minute. Yeah. So there's something about that that's really intriguing to me, is sometimes I feel like the design of a building is not done until the construction is finished. There's always an opportunity, even if it's in a small detail, to continuously improve on a design. And there's a lot of times when budget doesn't allow you to do that, or timeline or schedule, whatever that means. But I don't know if it's if I would be afraid of something like that that's so open-ended, or if it would, be inspiring and compelling to be like, you know what, whenever it's done is when it gets done. But that's not something that we typically see in our everyday, experiences, even projects with long lead times and, Gantt charts that, can span the whole length of a conference room wall and turn the corner.
Yeah, yeah. But being that most of my projects, like if they go longer than 2 years, start to finish, it's just like they just drive me crazy. So I don't know whether I'd be able to do it. But I mean, why not? I mean, I'd love to do like some type of religious structure beyond like the little stuff that I'll do for my church or something like
I think it would take an immense emotional capacity to undertake something like that.
that. Well, it would by today's, right? It would be in today's, you know, climate or something. I mean, I'm sure back in the day when he was just like, yeah, we'll just throw, we just have a few drawings, a few pages, a few sheets of drawings, and just go ahead,
Sheets
go
of
with it.
drawings.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. He'll be there
Yeah.
he'll be there on site pretty much every day anyways, or somebody working for him will be, basically holding the builder's hand, because they realize it's all a joint project, but like it's so different than now that where they're like, oh, get the damn architect out of here. Let's just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a frustration in general, but
and that was in a time where, I think Michael, I think that's very that's very appropriate, where like the artisans and the craftsmen who were building these things, were partners in the design process.
Yeah.
I think there was a trust level that's there that we don't have now, just because, I mean, the construction industry has changed, and trades are following construction documents that are stamped by AHJ or a fire marshal, and following these drawings to the letter, and held to certain budget and schedule constraints, where it's a much more straightforward linear process, where back then I'm trying to think of a builder or a craftsperson that I could approach today and say, so I've got some sketches, somewhere between 80 and 120 year lifespan of this project. You want to get going on this thing?
Yeah.
It's just kind of craft this thing together and then pass it off at some point when
well, did you
can't hold our heads up anymore. Like I don't understand how that works.
Did you get to because we were talking about these people being on site, and Michelle was talking about like Frank Lloyd Wright apprentices and stuff. Were you there when the Edgar Taffel lecture came through?
I don't think so.
And it might have been your freshman year, might have been sophomore year, but it was like one of the like what was the brick company that sponsored everything? Anyhow, General Shale like lecture series or something like that. But he came in and he talked about how he was on site every day for like Fallingwater. Like he was the on-site architect working through the details on it. And just some of the stories that he told about how, Wright drew up the front elevation and they had a plan, and it was him and another draftsman that basically finished the other elevations while Wright was going to pick up the Kaufmans at the airport and come back. And so it was like, we had like a day to finish these other elevations to show him. And it was like, he walks in without missing a beat, like picks up each of the ones, knows exactly which elevations are which, and just puts them, this is this, and this is this, and like just starts talking about the whole thing and the process. But he, and talked about building with that. But then also he said, on site, apparently Wright would, on the Johnson's wax house, I think, or something, he kept like making the cantilever longer and longer. And he was like, no steel, we can't put any steel in, it just has to be wood. And so eventually one day he's like, after Wright had left, he's like, I looked at the builder and he's like, look, we're going to put some steel in this, just not telling anybody. And so they just buried it inside. And I guess he probably died maybe 6 years after that lecture, but he was, it was an enjoyable one where he kind of just told the old stories of things that had happened. But that just reminds me of the way you're talking about those craftsmen and how they work together with the on-site architect. And that was what always happened there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and having renovated a couple of houses when I was in Nashville and doing a lot of the work myself, a lot of folks are like, well, assume you had it drawn and you just, you did everything that you just was like, man, that's no way. You had kind of a rough idea, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a design build all the way, which made it a lot of fun. But yeah,
Your
there's
takeoffs probably happened more so because of the drawings rather than like the actual details in it.
Oh, whatever, man, whatever that cliche is about, how many times you go to Home Depot during a day, when you're working on a construction project yourself, like multiply it by, I don't know, at least a 2 to 3 time multiplier. Just
Yeah.
Home Depot was like 2 miles away. So it was just like, all right, we're going to just get enough to get this and then we'll, figure out the rest later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the shittiest drawings that architects do are for themselves, right? Because nobody's paying for
Oh,
this
yeah.
and we're going to be there making all the decisions anyway. So as long as we just have a building permit, we can, the rest of it is, and we have a contractor that will like do
Right.
so if we're not doing right. Like I would, like this AT&T guy that's like saying, oh yeah, there's a foundation under there. I don't want to go near there. I'm like, I know that there's no foundation under there because I built that. And I said, I drew it. I built it. There's no foundation under there. You just don't want to go and move the line over because
We're currently working on a house design for myself now for my family, and it's very important that I am clearly articulating what's going into this house with my wife. That is, I'm not drawing it for me or the contractor. I want her on board with this vision, and yeah, I think that because
mine cares less about the
everybody's going to be.
Mine cares less about the vision and more so about the budget. She's like, you get the budget in. I know it's going to look fine, which is like ideal client. But then she's like, but the budget's lower than you think it is. So we just need to, figure out how to.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of managing ourselves in a small kind of 1,500 square foot house now. There's a lot of things we have to make concessions for and find efficiencies. So it's I think it's more to make sure that we can have a functional family abode.
Yeah.
That also looks good.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, you always want it to look good. I think that might be
the laundry room is very important.
Probably the harder, quiet struggle. No,
I'm giving myself a reprieve.
It's
It's not going to be our forever house, so I've taken some pressure off of it. It's like, all right, if I don't love how this thing turns out, you're out of.
It can't really, I don't know. I think it can't really be a forever house because we're just and if you do, then it just extends. Like I have friends, it took them 6 years to like build. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, forget it. It's like, I said, really the only reason why architects don't make up their mind about things is it's all budget. I mean, like I was telling a neighbor, I said, I went in to like pick out these paint colors. She's like, oh, which one are you going to go home and think about it? I'm like, no, it's going to be this one right here. I said, the only reason why architects don't make a decision is financial. And I said, that's the only thing that keeps us from like not being able to like do their own out and get it done like forever. Otherwise we'd be building homes and moving into other ones and just doing that the whole time. Yeah. That's what I think in my, I don't know. It's like I would have like moved like 10 times or something. I would have built and moved 10 times by now. If it was just about money,
Mm-hmm. I've got we've got a different setting now with just the fact that we've moved back to family land and sort of there's sort of this kind of getting it right becomes even more important because it's not like, well, I'm just going to sell it in a couple of years kind of idea that there's a lot more special and a lot more, sense of this place, for the stuff when I'm working on that now, as opposed to like when we were in Maryland, we're like, yeah, could we resell it? That was the question there. But now that we're down here and it's on the old property, it's like, no, this is sort of a one shot kind of thing. Get it right or get it to a point.
It's a legacy project.
Yeah. So maybe that is my Sagrada Familia. But it's got family in it, right?
And I think there's I think there's something to be said for like this is the first time I've done a new construction project for myself. The two previous homes were, both historic homes. So there was a certain framework that was in there that, like I
Yeah.
mentioned
Yeah.
before, like that, I could screw it up if I wasn't just honest about, what that home and was and what it wanted to be. So there was a lot of pressure taken off there. But now it's like there's just so many directions to go in. It's like
Yeah.
you know, what I might think that I want it to look like, kind of it ebbs and flows. So
Yeah.
Finalizing what that is and what I want to be comfortable with has been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And I think we kind of think of it, right? We don't want to have something that was of the time that it was. I think with architects for their own, they're like, well, I want it to be timeless, right? I don't want it to be like a trend. I don't want it to be, I want it to be this timeless, piece that I can like look and say, oh, okay, it's just always been, it's a good piece of architecture. It's just always been, kind of like what architecture is, a home is supposed to be, a home for someone to live in, and
Yeah.
it kind of goes around their lifestyle.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what do you like what do you like about being an architect, Michael?
I find, it's, the creativity, and I combine it though. It's not without some frustration at times, but I don't know. I think a lot of my enjoyment comes from the fact that I am dealing with someone else who's going to be another user, in that collaboration, that that connection, that being able to put something on paper and you're kind of showing it to them, and maybe you pick some things out. But it's those moments when then they haven't been in there, haven't seen it, and they come to it and they're like, oh wow, this, like, just it, like everything, even though they were saying, yes, I got it, yeah, I think I understand, it's still that seeing it open up, and I get a lot of joy out of that. And I'm a big believer in community and sort of even like hand holding, especially with clients and stuff like that, because I want to take them through this process. I don't want them to feel left out there. And so I enjoy that connection, which I know might be a lot of people that are like, oh, that's crazy. But for me, I find that quite fulfilling, even in the difficult moments. But I enjoy connecting with people, enjoy collaboration and working together, and
I don't think
coming
it's
up with these
crazy,
beautiful
Michael.
things.
I think it's admirable. That's what I'm like thinking, like, wow, I'm old. No, but I don't. I'm old, and maybe I should be doing like design build the whole time. No, I think it's a very good. I think it's a very good thing, and I think that is what a lot of clients, some more than others, and I always think it's nice when they see the space, and then they're like, okay, I understand why we went through this process. I understand like why, it's like, a lot of them, they don't realize how long it's going to be. They don't realize all of the things that we do. And we kind of have to know about them, right? As opposed to like some drafter or something that's going to say, oh, here, I can do this right here. I mean, when a client, when you first meet them and they're like, well, what would you do? And I'm like, it's like, well, I don't really know you yet. It's like, I don't know what your needs are. I don't know, it's like, I don't know who you are. Right. So it's like, I have to get to know who my client is in order to be able to design something that's just for them. And then that is, that's the reason why we're architects, as opposed to like somebody that's just going to like draw something and, oh yeah, here, this will work,
And I also think for the builder too, to have us there, because I'm the first one when the drywall goes up and says like, it looks amazing, doesn't it? This is going to be a while. Like, to try to just manage what because then they're going to be bitching about, the builder is taking forever. I thought it'd be, you're like, no, this is,
yeah.
And so you want to try to, and I think that's what we bring as architects to that, the full process, not just here's drawings, bye, see you. It's here's drawings. Let me take you through this. This is, we're getting it built. We'll be out there at some regular interval. Let's, work with it and bring the client along so that they see and feel that benefit of you being there. And I think that's, again, that's part of it. I don't know this necessarily in terms of what I'm saying that that's what I enjoy part of it, but that's definitely part of it that I think is necessary and what makes their satisfaction in the end so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brad?
So I'd say very similar to Michael. I really like the client experience, and it's with the project type that I enjoy. It's very personal. I use the term romance a lot, and sometimes it almost feels like it's a dating process. Getting to know someone and helping them realize some kind of a goal or a dream. And I know that there's some architects and designers out there that don't like the residential side because they feel like can be sometimes like marriage counseling. I really like the intimate nature of working with someone on something that is so specific and so personal to them. And I often talk about the locally owned restaurants, bars, and the boutique retail project type. To me, it feels a lot like a residential project type, because those are owners that have a dream and starting a business. It's not their forever home, but it is an extension of themselves and something that represents them, and that they're really opening up and exposing themselves to the public commentary on whether or not they like this brand and this idea. So the stakes are a little higher on it, but it's a fun and rewarding process. When like Michael mentioned, that you get to work with somebody, and I think there are these moments when you get a light bulb sort of turns on for them at some point. Oh, this is what this is looking like, because they're not trained in translating two-dimensional floor plans to a three-dimensional interior. However many 3D models you can build, it's just not the same until you get into the space.
Yeah.
So being there for those moments when they get it, and hopefully it exceeds their expectations, is a very rewarding feeling. And in general, having something tangible to show for my efforts on a daily basis is very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And having something that you can show people, whether it's always fun to meet at a restaurant or a bar that you designed, to see people enjoying your work. Accolades are nice, but just there's a lot of satisfaction in watching someone enjoy what you helped create, whether it's a home or some kind of a public realm building.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, I think we kind of get so involved, right? We're like around other architects and everything. We just don't realize kind of how, even being like at Best Buy last night with like good guys. And I said, yeah, I got to get this laptop right because I have a podcast. And they're like, you have a podcast? And the guy like goes, that's dope. And he goes, yeah, I've been here for a long, he had like this thing up like, 6 years. He was up there for 6 years. Of course, the reason why he's working at Best Buy for 6 years and the good guys is because he goes, well, because I have my real estate business. And I'm like, okay, there you go. Right. So he's got a real estate business, but he's just like I think the good guys, Geek Squad or whatever is just his sidekick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're like, wow, like what are you working on? Like, what do you do? I mean, people ask you, right? It's like
Right.
it's like if you say you're an architect, you're like, oh, what do you design? What do you do?
The questions lawyers never get.
Well, I did meet one. There was an attorney who's actually the husband of one of my kids, somebody that my kids goes to school with. She was older, going to art classes or whatever. And I said like, oh, what time? I said, oh, what? I said, oh, I said, oh, why don't you give me your card? Because, you know, in case I ever need it. He goes, hopefully you never need me because I'm a criminal attorney. I'm like, well, I said, in case I ever did, I would want you as my criminal attorney. But yeah. So what would you like to say about the future of architecture?
I guess what I'd like to see, you know, I think it's the growth and the connection to the public that, you know, we continue to work to be a benefit towards society, and that we're strengthening communities, and, you know, working on a big thing for us is stewardship, you know, and that in how we, you know, not in like the heavy-handed, you know, biblical stewardship kind of thing. It's more so in the we're taking care of this because we want it to last. We want it to continue on. It's not to propagate for more money or something like that. It's that, and while we do that with stewardship, it's also the idea of gaining a larger community. I think one of the things that really draws me to CRAN, being more so a small practice architect too, is that sense of community and that we're all there. And I think, you know, as we kind of take community, be it in the actual community, like how does that structure react to the neighborhood? Are you knocking down a nice house where there's a great rhythm in the neighborhood to put up some monster, you know, who might be theoretically in the same style, but it's just out of scale? Like that's not being a good steward. You know, that's not being good to the community. That's not, you know, so it's addressing those things and maintaining those things and really keeping that in front of us as a profession, that while yes, we do have our main clients, it's also everything else is our client. You know, the land is our client, the neighborhood is our client, you know, as we kind of work out, and even, you know, how it affects us and how we, you know, choose to treat those things as well, I think is really important, and something we can't lose focus of as a profession, and something I think we work really hard to do with our clients and with, you know, the builders, anybody we deal with. You know, that's always one of the first things I'm trying to talk about, is how we approach those things.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's like we're in the custom residential architects network. I think a lot of people think that only means like these huge houses on huge pieces of property with limitless budgets, right? And that's not, you know, it's designing a home for anyone. You know, it's designing within any budget. It's designing, you know, with any, you know, scope of work. I mean, that's really, we're designing for the client, and we have many different clients. So. Brad?
So I would say, gosh, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in there, Michael. We I think as a civilization, we have to take care of each other. You know, I think architects and designers are, you know, we're the stewards of the built community. Michelle, some of your comments at CRAN about ADUs helping out with housing shortages and housing crisis, and, you know, how those are managed when, you know, if they're being used as Airbnbs just solely for profit, where they could help a transitional family or a young professional have a roof over their head, you know, for a short period of time, or as a longer term rental, and what that means to our sense of community versus just, you know, a profit margin is very real. You know, how we build for lower income communities, you know, not just providing a box, but a sense of place, and a sense of purpose and pride. You know, even if you don't, I don't think you have to own the structure that's around you and over your head in order to have a sense of pride with where you are and where you live.
Yeah, exactly.
And from an environmental standpoint, I mean, gosh, there's not going to be much point in building pretty things if it all burns down or is underwater, and, you know, or a couple of generations from now. So, yeah, that has to be a top priority. If we're not around to enjoy it, there's no point. And in that respect, I feel like there's some things with technology. I wish the Southeast was a little bit more progressive with some mass timber and some more sustainable practices especially for larger scale multifamily buildings, where I think some of those environmental impacts can really be felt. I'd like to see that progress a little bit more in my region. And I'm also really curious about AI and even to some extent social media and its influence in architecture and design. It wasn't that long ago that BIM was very new, and a lot of designers hadn't adopted it yet. I think there's an interesting caveat with AI in that BIM modeling, it's more for the designers and the tradespersons to as a tool for production, and sometimes and as well as design. But you don't have the everyday consumer messing around in Revit and hey, I figured out a cool new way to model this roof. It's like, yeah, that's not really what we're getting out of our clients. But with AI generation, all of a sudden there can be tons of new ideas that are out there that could be precedent, or they could bring on unrealistic expectations of what's available. Could go in both ways, but I think it's we have to embrace the technology going forward. We can't fight against it. And I think as designers, we have to learn when there's a new tool available, especially if it's something that the public brings to us, how to wield it responsibly, and do some good and creative things with it.
Are you seeing a lot of clients asking you for that? Or, right? Like, I think in some ways, when somebody brings you like 50 Pinterest images, AI is just kind of like putting all of that stuff. It's that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're going to give them, but
yeah, not yet. Haven't really seen it. Haven't really seen it too much firsthand. But there have been some times where just in-house, thinking about, right here, the client asked us to kind of envision something that has all these components to it. Let's throw it in the generator and just see what it comes up with. It's like, wow, that's pretty awesome. It would have taken me a week and a half to just model something conceptually and Photoshop it, and it's like, wow, that just happened in 6 minutes. So yeah, that's pretty nice. There's also there's been a practical application with, let's say if it's an office layout with like a wide open area for multiple desks, or like a restaurant seating layout or something like that. They've got some pretty easy to manage software in there that, like, all right, I can populate this large area, this banquet hall, with X amount of tables based on this. That it's not a creative process if I'm well, it still, I guess, kind of is a creative process, but it's more of a labor if I'm dropping these tables in individually, putting the right spacing. It's just, if I can hit a button and generate something like that, just to help speed something along for like a feasibility study, or a seat count for an ROI on a pro forma, then yeah, it's like let's save the client some time and money that way. And so I think that can be fairly useful, just thinking very short term practically from what I do.
Yeah, especially if I'm probably less early adopter type of person. And so, sorry, I dropped something. And so I'm intrigued by it. And also the same thing, I think what I'd have to play with it, but I'm making an assumption here in this, but I feel like while I think there is some savings in some like remedial tasks, I still think it's almost like we should, be able to take where we've gained those savings and incorporated that into a better design, something more, the client saving that for something. Like it's when my initial job out of college, which didn't do anything really much to speak of in terms of work, but it was something that the guy who ran our studio would keep talking about, was that, he had done paper drafting and then moved into AutoCAD. And he goes, to still explain to clients, especially kind of in that, East Tennessee area that I was working in, was like, they're like, well, you got it on a computer now, it should be faster. And he's like, well, no, it's still, it's still that there's an amount of work there that's necessary, and it still is going to take the time. We're just able to do it better, but the time really, some things might collapse, some things might be a little easier. It's like, what I found with BIM is that I charge a lot more on the front end to do, especially when I'm dealing with like an existing structure, because I'm basically building one house in 3D that I typically did it in, I've got 4 plans and, 4 elevations or something with it before. And, trying to still explain to them that those things happen and make them aware of it. And my practice is still relatively new. So it's something that I'm kind of learning and going like, oh, I need to tell them that next time. But regarding AI, I think that's the one thing I think there will be ways that we will save time, but we should still think of that time as ways to improve the design, not just to solely cut the cost of what the owner is outlining. Because then
absolutely.
I think we're not doing a service to the greater community by sort of viewing it that way. And I would say where I felt like I worked in the past one time, that might have been the approach with AI, like, oh, here, we can get past this. We can do this cheaper than everybody else, and we're just going to do it. And then is the design that great once we're done with it? And that was frustrating to me. So I could see where that could creep in, and maybe I'm playing devil's advocate and not being as open and like, this is going to be great kind of attitude. But I think my only concern is something like that it lessens the product that comes out in terms of how the public interaction happens. Because like Michelle said, you get 10,000 Pinterest boards. I have done that with clients, and they come back and I'm like, I have seen 5 different things in each one of those pictures, and it's not what they saw. And that's exactly. Where I'm like, it's like,
or I'm saying,
I just like this big window here.
This one thing, and I'm like, no, that's why I'm like 10, and I want you to put what you like.
Why? Yeah, exactly. Why? That why is a big one, because I'm like, this is traditional. You said you wanted modern. And they're like, oh no, I just wanted you to see this little detail of the wood. I like the wood. Like, okay, gotcha. I had to ask, but it's one of those things. So I think AI is definitely, just watching the presentation we had at CRAN, I thought that was, some people might chalk it up as a thought experiment or something, but I found it extremely enlightening. And I love the idea of, especially in an alternative material where we're looking at something more sustainable, how that can speed the process up. That there's a lot more of that testing side of things, I think, is also a strong point for strong argument for why we would do AI. So
research into other materials, into other things. Is that gonna, can that help us with issues of sustainability and everything? I thought that whole thing, because it was, really what people, they're not paying for, our services are not a product, right? They're services, it's a process. And so what people are, really have to realize, it's like, they could get plans from like some other thing. They could get plans for that, but with us, it's process oriented, and so that whole, their whole continuing ed seminar was kind of based on this whole process of them like working, in a collaborative environment, to come up with something and really be saying at the end, like, hey, we didn't come up with the final product. we're still moving ahead in this process. And
Yeah, it's
that
a
was
test kitchen almost.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, exactly. And that's
And
what we need more of,
I agree.
because so many things, like, people see HGTV, right? It's like, okay, we're going to do this for you, blah, 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 blah. We get it done. And see how fast we got it done, and like I had made a
30
post.
minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes. 30 minutes, we're done with the show. We're gone. And so I had said yesterday, I went into the building department, and I'll go into the building department. They always have like HGTV going on. I'm like, why do they show HGTV when none of these people get building permits, or they don't really show any of the process? But, or, can AI help us with the building permit process? Like, if we didn't, right? Right? Like, let's bring that up to them. Like, if we could, we would no longer have to explain to them that this roof overhang is bigger on this side than it is on the other side, which I had to do for this ADU of my own, right? Like, it was this big, long, complicated thing to like tell this person that was in intake that, where my, what was the roof overhang, what was the part of the structure, what if it did just, blow through and do all those things, and could perceive that, like, yes, this is a plot, right?
Or sometimes where they just throw a general question on it, like, where is this? And you're like, it's right here on this page. Why'd you put it there? Oh, that's just in my, nobody puts those on there usually. And
yeah,
it still doesn't give you any right to make me have
them.
to do this, but it's like, they just assume, they're like, just so they get it through the review step.
Yeah.
But we can have a whole podcast on the building department, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
If
like,
and Michael, I feel like
ones.
Michael, as a as a small business owner yourself, and I think you and I have had some conversations on this, but I'm fortunate with our office that we've got some good designers in house. So having the ability to bounce some ideas off of one another is something that we can do. But I can see a value in AI as almost a collaborative tool for some smaller shops where, I mean, it's hard to not get stuck in a certain rhythm, especially if if you're working on a similar project type consistently, and kind of going back to your useful tools, and just having something that you can quickly think about something a little bit differently, I feel like could be a helpful advantage. And it may actually be like, oh yeah, that's garbage. I like what I did. Just it may be confirming, your natural design instincts, but that's just
it's also, I mean, I could see it too, where it's like, okay, here's your site plan. Like, you gotta decide what's going to maximize these spots. What do you see when it's this shape? Just, and sort of like going through those different areas, roof. And I think there's something to be said for roof iterations and stuff like that. I'm not always an early adopter in technology. I'm not sure why that is. I've got to guess, but it's just I kind of want to get a good feeling of what it is. I mean, when I started my company, that's when I also just jumped into BIM. I had never used it throughout my career, but it beat the other option of having to sort of like bounce between a 2D and a 3D software that we were using, or that I had used in
so
the past.
what program do you use?
I use ArchiCAD.
Which one?
Yeah, ArchiCAD.
Oh yeah. No,
I mean, using that with the BIMX is the ability to give a client the sort of model after the meeting to sort of play with and look at has been helpful. And I think they see a lot of justifications and things that I did when I show them that, and that they're able to take that away from it. So, whereas, you can't, at least I don't know of a way to do it yet, hand out a SketchUp model for them to sort of play with and spin around or understand why. I mean, the nice thing about it is you can kind of just model one room and it's done. There's some simplicity in doing something like that, but most of the stuff I'm trying to work on also is where we're going to have to model the whole thing, and it makes sense to just the process for how the client views it and how everybody's looking at it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay, is there anything else?
I think we have covered a lot. We can do it. You can always do a part 2. I can come up with 3 more houses. You know, the post next year symposium, we can do it 1 year apart, you know, just do it that way.
Oh, I know. I can't even, you know, it's like getting done with like a big project, right? When we get done with these symposiums, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, like what the hell just happened? But I thought, I mean, I thought it was, I liked going, you know, I like going to the CRAN symposiums. I mean, you know, it's harder to be involved in like the planning of it, but and then also enjoy it, you know, and a lot of times I feel like I'm there, but then I don't really get a chance to enjoy it, or you know, it's like I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody, but then I'm like pulled away, you know, because I have to go get somebody's lunch or something. But you know, it's like but I'm glad that I met you guys there. I think that it's a great place to, you know, to meet other people who are doing residential work and kind of talk about that. And you know, I think that it's a you know, I had a good time. Did you guys have a good time?
Yeah. Meeting some of the other folks. I mean, every year I mean, it feels like summer camp, you know. I've got my favorites that I met the year before, and then meet some new folks. And I'm like, oh man,
exactly.
I like them too. You know, you're kind of building this collective network of just awesome, fun folks. And I like the residential designers. It's a, you know, like we talked about before, it's a personality kind of thing, you know, that we're not all working on different types of civic and industrial and state work buildings. You know, and it's even though everyone has their own flavor, I think we have such a common thread that it's easy to start a conversation and really dig into you know, something with someone that you hadn't met before, and get to skip a lot of the small talk and just get into, oh yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And then you know, everybody pulls out their phones and start showing pictures of stuff they're working on and 3D models and things like that. And it's just fun. It's easy.
Yeah, it's way better than, like, you don't feel like you're not included in the club when you show up at the bigger conferences, and it's like, okay, well, I work for this, you know, initials now. It used to be a bunch of people's names or something, but it's like, there's, you know, and one of 100, and we, you know, and they're all kind of hanging out. Like, it just, you know, it's just so much more inclusive, and you know, the fact that everybody's passion is very similar, like, and just, you know, it's the first one I went to was Santa Rosa, and that was like, and I was still working as design studio manager for a design build company, and like I left there, and that was, you know, 2016, and I was like, oh, I feel like I could start my own company after. It was just like, it was so so invigorating and so, you know, affirming of like, of all of the things you want to do, and seeing people there who are doing that. I think is really important. And then, you know, once I finally did, 2 years later, I made it to Cincinnati, and that's when I think I filed my LLC like a week before I went before the symposium. So
I did meet you in Cincinnati, and that's what Neil had told me. Neil had told me, like, oh yeah, we met him in Cincinnati, and I was like, oh, we did? I don't know. That was like the first symposium that I'd been to. I was like still kind of like, you know, what's going on, and
so Neil, and like Neil, that, you know, we hadn't seen him in a couple of years. I mean, it was great. It was just, again, it's like, you know, he's one of the people that, like, he walked up to me, and I was like, Santa Rosa. And it's like, he looked at me funny, and I was like, how did you know? I was like, yeah. He's like, you look familiar. I was like, we had dinner, you know, in Cincinnati the first night. We didn't have any set up dinners or anything like that. We just
No, that's funny.
It's a special thing and a special group.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.